Hello everybody. I wanted to do a quick video on an overview of customer development. Customer development is basically just a fancy term for how to talk to your customers to learn the things that you want to learn. Customer development can and should be used almost throughout the entire life cycle of a business, even established businesses. But what I'm going to talk about today is specifically in the early stages of a business, and then even farther down, problem and solution. Customer development is a fantastic tool for answering the question, is the problem I think I'm solving real? And does the solution I have in mind match that problem? So customer development was pioneered by Steve Blank. He wrote Four Steps to Epiphany, Startup Owner's Manual, fantastic books. They go into a lot of depth, really, really boring to read, but super, super useful. I highly recommend looking into them if you find this interesting. And before we get into it, customer development is not a way for you to stroke your confirmation bias. This is probably the number one mistake that entrepreneurs make with customer development. They say, I have an idea for a startup. I know I should talk to my customers, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to get my customers to tell me that my idea is a good idea. Almost regardless of what they say, I'm going to get them to tell me what I want to hear. And if you do that, customer development is useless. So as human beings, we have an incredible ability to trick ourselves. If you don't believe me, go on Google cognitive biases, and you can find a Wikipedia list of just hundreds of actually pretty impressive ways that as human beings, we trick ourselves into thinking something that's not true. So customer development, if done correctly, can get around this. How can we objectively test whether or not the problem we're solving is real and the solution I have in mind is actually a sufficiently better solution to that problem than what currently exists? So the way that we start this is trying to figure out that the problem is real. Paul Graham is the founder of Y Combinator, and he gets to see a lot of startups, and he says the number one reason startups fail is they make dog food that dogs don't want to eat. Basically, they're solving a problem that nobody cares about. So the very first question you ask when you get down an interview, you find somebody that you believe is in your target market, and you say, what are the three biggest problems you have right now? I use something called the barbershop test even. When I go into a barbershop, you know that their hairdressers have that same conversation 100 times, what the weather's like, whatever. I always say, what are the three biggest problems you're having right now? And they just sit and they'll talk the entire time about the problems they're having. And it kind of gets your entrepreneurial juices flowing a little bit. But you do the same thing in customer development interviews. What are the three biggest problems? A lot of people ask, like, what if my problem I'm solving is kind of niche and would never come up in the top three? That's fine. Still ask what are the three biggest problems. Because even if you have to narrow them down in further questions, you want to know where your problem falls on the totem pole of burning pains in their life. If you're solving a problem, but it's 50th on somebody's list, how excited are they going to be to pay you to have you help them solve that problem? So you want to know where it falls. So once you've got kind of the range around where your problem is, you want to ask, how do you currently solve these problems? Clayton Christensen always says that a great entrepreneur can find out when somebody is building their own workaround to a problem, and then they can solve it more elegantly. You want to know how people are currently solving problems because it gives you a window into the current ways that things are being done. And if you can determine kind of how things are currently being done, it allows you to figure out if your solution is sufficiently better or if it's just kind of, a mild sustaining innovation. And a good way to find out this is by the magic wand test. You say, if you were able to wave a magic wand and solve that problem today, what would the solution look like? And you can get some really, really great things from your customer by asking that one simple question. So let's say that you've done these three questions, the problem interview, with a bunch of people, and you've realized, you know what? Yes, this problem is real. It's not maybe always in the top three, but I know it's in the top five, and 2 times out of 5, it's in the top 3. Like this is a serious problem. So then you can go to the solution interview, and then you ask people, why is this problem important to solve? How much does it cost you in terms of revenue, customers, time, frustration? This is a fantastic question to ask people. Asking somebody how much would you be willing to solve a problem is a horrible question to ask. The reason is people don't know. There's a really famous University of Chicago experiment that was done where they brought like 100 students into a room and they said, hey, we're doing market research for this coffee mug that has a little University of Chicago emblem on it. We want to sell these coffee mugs for $7 each. If these were available today, how many people in this room would pay $7 for them? And like 3/4 of the people raised their hand. And as soon as they did the poll, they said, it's your lucky day. We have 100 of them right outside. You can purchase them on your way out. They sold like 5 of them. The reason? People don't know how much they're willing to pay for something. They don't know what they're willing to pay for, period. I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows. It's fine. It's just that you can't rely on people saying they'd be willing to pay for something. You just can't. But you ask them questions that actually measure things, like how much does this cost you? If I can, like, as a business owner, I can say this costs my bookkeeper 5 hours a week. Now I can measure that. I can measure actually what I'm actually losing. So it's a really, really useful question. The next one is you want to present, this is the first time you're actually going to talk about yourself. Everything up until now, they shouldn't know what you're even talking about. They should just know that you're doing some research. They shouldn't know what problem you're trying to solve. Now you're going to slowly present them with your solution. You're not going to try to sell them. Don't sell them. Just give them little pieces. And then as you're walking them through your solution, you stop and you prompt them. You know, what do you think about that? Does this seem like it's something that's useful? Like, how do you feel like you would use this? How would your life be different after this? How does this compare to your existing solutions? And I can't stress this enough, in a way that you got to figure out how to do this interview in a way that you're not pitching them. You're not trying to sell them, because if you're trying to sell them, you're not measuring anything. You're just trying to sell. You shouldn't be trying to sell right now. You're trying to determine if your solution is actually solving the problem. So after you've done this, and if you feel that they're sufficiently interested in your solution, you can use something called the price anchoring strategy, just something I found really useful for getting pricing stuff. The first thing you say is, if this was offered today to you for free, would you use it? Now, if you've made it past question number 2 here, everybody should say yes, right? Everybody should say yes. If it was free, I'd use it. The reason you ask this question is for the very rare time you get somebody that hesitates. If they hesitate, you need to stop them immediately and say, why? Why did you hesitate? Was there something that was subconsciously holding you back a little bit? What was it? Let's talk about it. Number 2, if you're selling into a company, you might say something like, oh, absolutely, we would use it. I just need to talk to the purchasing manager and their IT team to make sure that we could implement it. You need to write that stuff down. You need to know that, okay, if I'm going to sell this product, I need to get the buy off of these other people, not just the person who's using it. So after you ask if it's free, the next thing you ask is you pick a number that you think would be something like 10x what you would realistically actually sell this for, and you ask them that. So you say something like, what if it was $100,000 and you think that the product would be maybe a $10,000 software solution? Normally they'll go, oh my goodness, no way I could spend $100,000. There's no way that I could probably justify spending more than $12,000 on this solution. So you see what happened there? I've done this probably 100 times in customer development interviews, and a good 70 to 80% of the time, they will anchor you back to around the area of where they think they'd be willing to pay. And then basically you've had your customer tell you roughly how much they'd be willing to pay for this problem. So after you've done that, if you've gone through this whole thing, if they've said, yes, it's free, and then they've maybe anchored your price back, then you want to see if you can get some buy-in. By buy-in, I mean, the best thing you can do is you can get a purchase order. Get somebody to write down, if you deliver this solution in the way you have just said, by X date, I will pay you Y. Because I mean, the purchase orders have different legal bindings in different states and things like that, but that doesn't matter. Getting somebody to sign something saying they would purchase it, that's quite a bit of buy-in. If you're on the internet or something like that, get their email address. Somebody who's completely unwilling to commit at all, and you're not really doing this because you want these sales, although that is kind of nice. What you're doing this for is you want the person who hesitates again, who says, I don't know if I'm willing to today. Because if they're unwilling to today, why will they be willing to when it's actually in front of them? And you need to know what their excuses are. Why aren't they willing to sign it today? Why aren't they willing to give you their email address today? Why aren't they willing to make any kind of a commitment saying that they want to purchase this? And then last of all, just a couple of general guidelines. Ask objective questions that measure things. Going back to what we said before, don't ask, would you be willing to pay for this? What would you be willing to pay? Ask, how much does this cost you? Rob Fitzpatrick wrote a great book called The Mom Test, where he basically says every question you ask should pass the mom test. The mom test is your mom wants to tell you what you want to hear. How could you frame a question that if your mom knew what you wanted, she wouldn't be able to invalidate your hypothesis? How could you ask a question that your mom could invalidate your business idea without knowing she's hurting your feelings? The next one is try to watch out for what Steve Blank says, people foaming at the mouth. People that say, oh yeah, that idea, that sounds kind of good. Or yeah, I think we might be able to use that. Those people aren't going to buy your product. The people that are going to buy your product are the ones that are going to jump across the desk and be like, I need this now. And then last of all, you ask people for referrals. Say, do you know anybody else who has this similar problem that I can talk to? So you just have a steady stream of these interviews. I hope everybody found this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or hit me up on Twitter. And okay.